Hello, everyone, and this should be a casual one for the weekend. This one is a pre-recording during the week, but it should go out on Saturday. And this one is called. I've been sort of trying to figure out the title. The current title is "Post-Right in a Woke-Free World." I didn't want to use woke rights because that might a couple of people might not understand you know misunderstand the context here. Excuse me, just had to reset the mic. Anyway, the purpose of this video is to talk about something which myself and many others have noticed, and you know the entire right wing, what we call like the sort of online right wing scene has been, you know, largely captured at this point. There are a few spaces which I would say and places you can go, which are largely free from that. You know, myself with Iron Duke and his sort of Discord, which you know, they're genuine, you know, genuine people, real, patriots, but also very much committed to ideas and thinking, which is a key tenet for any sort of political movement. You also have others, you know, the Beowulf Foundation, for example, real solid guys over there, which I'm a part of, and a lot of the Pendragon as well, and stuff too. So real world stuff, and then of course you have like the basket weavers, um, shieldings, um, countless others. So there are real groups, but largely a lot of the podcast scene, a lot of the internet scene, sort of writ large, um, has been captured. There was a point that a lot of the people, that I mentioned, and people part of our sort of network, some have fallen away, some have focused on other directions. I would say were the cutting edge, and in fact, you ended up finding a lot of like talking points managed to find their way, um, you know, to mainstream media, or at least being referenced. I mean, and I think this sort of it's collapsed in the last year and a bit. I think the last, if people remember, the last sort of unity event probably was before the general election. You had 0 seats, and that was targeted at the Tory party, and it was very much led up by academic agent. So I did a comedy sort of meme of like that really heavily overweight chap at a football game covered in tattoos with a kettle drum on his stomach and everything, and I called it like Big Baz, 0 seats, banging a drum for 0 seats and everything. And that sort of went semi-viral and what have you, and shared about, and then, of course, it got picked up by the likes of Farage, and then it got picked up by other people as a phrase, 0 seats, and it just sort of spread round, and like how remigration, which I think started with Steve Laws and everything, that sort of thing, phrase, and then it gets sort of banded about. And the problem with these phrases is sometimes if you create a term or anything, it can be captured by your enemies and then just twisted to mean something else. But in this instance, it wasn't, and it was. It was just dedicated to make sure the Tories lost. That um, they lost, and that was the last time everyone was sort of on board with it, apart from Tory boys, but types, but they irrelevant anyway. They weren't relevant beforehand, and they're sure as hell not now. I mean, they're sort of moved on to reform or something after saying they would never, support Farage or what have you. But anyway, so that was the last sort of time of, I guess, unity in our space. But one of the problems is, and this is another YouTuber called Bamblas who did a video recently and said a lot of like the online stuff has it's not really stood the test of time. It's been, quite weak. Um, you could say, it started with 4chan and the messaging board stuff. And while it had, some interesting points, he said that fundamentally it was built. A lot of it was sandcastles. It was built on sand. It didn't build anything, and it it's ultimately, you know, come to nothing. I mean, for me, yeah, that is largely true. The only positive thing is that through this, I would got into contact with people at the Basket Weavers. I then got into, it sort of connected me up with, you know, a lot of the guys I stream with, like Mitch, Atman, Iron Duke, Aubrey, and those people, and also Nathan Hood and countless other people who has led to, with like the Pendragon and the Foundate and stuff, real world, real world things, you know, that is, non-political and is something within our remit of control. And that's something I like. It's something within our remit of control. It's not something that anyone can take away or undermine. I and I was watching this video, and it's like, where should the right what the right should do next? And you go back to usual vanguardism and all that sort of stuff. And I was thinking to myself, the entire political system is stacked against us. I mean, I'm still preaching to the converted here. Everyone's going to go, yes, 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 I know this. But you have to actually think on a deeper level. Take today, for example, Palestine Action. This is an example, by the way. Palestine Action, um, were were sort of the courts overturned, you know, the prescribing them as a terrorist organization. They raided a arms factory or something like that in Bristol or near Bristol, um, and attacked somebody with a sledgehammer, but they were found not guilty and all that sort of stuff. If you look at all the networks and institutions involved in this story, they're all left wing, and it's basically left wing, left wing. The sort of they're the same people. It's the same network. But then if you take more, examples of, like a right, the right wing version of Palestine Action, which we have seen, they just get banned and they're all arrested and sent to prison. Okay, so this is just Smithian politics, right? This is the bare basics, which we all understand. You know, there is a two-tier system in this country when it comes to that. You're either with the state, you can have factions within which will bicker, which I think probably is, more relevant to this recent scenario. And the thing though is, as I'm sitting here and you're watching it, it's like I can't change that. I can't change that. You listening here can't change that fact. Collectively, you know, we can't really change it at this moment. There's nothing we can change at this moment. But what we can do and what we can retreat into is um, our own work, our own discovery. And I said, I look back at the art stream we did. I look back at Alexander Adams and what he's doing with the likes of Pharaoh, Fender videos, and stuff. An avant-garde style, radical, traditionalist, perennial traditionalist, what have you, art scene. Aaron Hook with his sort of literacy book space, heavy in literature. I talked about with him self-publishing as well. Books of self-publishing, and then of course the Pendragon charity work, and then even okay, you mean parish council? You don't think about local council, parish council, something in your local community. And the thing though is and I've been involved more recently in some local parish stuff, and um, more recently there was I mean the most simple thing was there was I'm involved in local uh, nature reserve, and you find as you get older you can stay depressed and be hyper focused on what's happening in parts of the world and in this country which you can't control, or you can, engross yourself in all that, and it's depressing and it's also time consuming. Or you can, and it's not me saying you touch grass, but you can ground yourself in some form of reality while holding true to those true values and true beliefs that you hold. And this is something which, you know, I think everyone is in consensus with. You had Alex Esteem guy who I like. You've had, um, you know, the Iron Duke and many of other sort of agree on this sort of position. Nathan. I mean, it's one of the reasons why a lot of these groups were and basket weavers were set up. Mark, for example, why this was all set up in the first place. And uh, you know, for me, I think the future for the right, or what we would call the right, and unfortunately, there is a point where being right wing may now be um, really, really persecuted, and not just persecuted, but viewed as like a lame, uncool position. MAGA might become the legacy from what's been going on. Populist parties, even reform, and fallout from post-reform. Because I'm thinking ahead now, many, many, many years ahead. It may be uncool, but what I think is the only thing what we can do is build up something that's based in arts, in culture, in literature, and which is tradition, which unfortunately for the last, you know, second half of the century has been very dominated by the left, but it's a very powerful part of society still to this day. And I think for the future of the right, that's where we can plant our flag, and that's where we can express our the radical views, critique of society. And it's a place where a lot of the grifters, because the problem is it's not so much the left, it's people who latch on to movements within our movements who end up, uh, and this is what Bamblas was saying, is that when you have the masses, the normies move in, and then you have the psychopaths, the people with the grifters who don't care about the movement, everything, and then that's how everything just becomes degraded and collapses. And we've seen this 100 times, the liberalist. I mean, there's hundreds of examples, and it's only been like nearly 10 years. You've seen plenty of examples of this, and we get gatekeeping and all that. But I think instead of actively doing the gatekeeping, like saying no, this person can't come in, and actually being like paranoid, if you create a scene which requires more than the average person can give, it would naturally gatekeep the psychopaths and the masses out. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because if we can create sort of I mean, dare I say, a subculture, or yeah, or something on the right, which is based in the arts scene, you know, in poetry and literature and what have you. It would actually um, have stronger foundations um, than anything that really is going on now. Maybe apart from obviously the Castles project, because that's real world. But all of this would be real world as well. And it's uh, one thing you find is criticisms of this mindset would be, well, you're saying that everyone on the right should just sort of retreat into a corner, of the internet or what have you, and then just start theory pilling, sort of writing art and everything, and you'll be, and then they'll be like cut off from everything else going on in the world. But my point is the way that a lot of the people on the right and people that we originally watched and still watch in some cases today, the way that they managed to get And I mean, I'm not talking about the people influencers who were, have backers and all that, but people like right back along is the scene itself draws people to it, and almost it's kind of like um, a reverse of what happened. Maybe you could say in um, the last century. It was different though because the institutions were in favor of a lot of the radical left liberal arts, um, sort of stranglehold over it and its reaction to traditionalism. I mean, avant-garde um, sort of style art was a reaction against traditionalism, but today we need that reaction against liberalism. We need that reaction against egalitarian progressivism. That's what we need. That is a foundation that we need, and the thing new is when you look at half the people who are meant to be on the right. I mean, look at Reform now. They don't even. There's no. They don't even call themselves traditionalists or even conservative in the small C sense. That, I mean, there is no conservatism now. There is no. It's just I mean, it's an empty buzzword anyway. But there's no advocate for promoting inequality or, you know, the only people who will, who are strongly advocate about it's about economics. It's about the sort of the free market economics, the Thatcherite style society, which has led the way to globalism and to the problems we face today. So that's where I think that's where the right should go into, you know, the art scene, into literature, and start creating. I think that is the future, and I think it's one of the best places we could go. And we have self-publishing. We don't need to worry about publishers or all this because, as Alexander Adams, when I had him on on the show, you know, it's something that they had to create the scene themselves, and that's what's got to happen again, and that's what's going to happen now. So anyway, this will go out on Saturday uh, in the afternoon. So thank you for everyone who's watching. Please like and subscribe below, and I'll catch you all next time.